For my presentation, I decided to present on Martin Luther. So why Martin Luther? As a Christian, sometimes it's really difficult for me to connect with philosophers who do not reference religion or God or some type of natural force that they rely on when they're discussing matters of philosophy. The second reason is that I have previously taken classes where Luther is discussed, and I've always found his outspoken nature very intriguing, and I can personally connect with that. So that's really interesting for me. And the third reason is I really enjoy reading his work and find a lot of it comical, especially his writings from when he was hiding at the Wartburg after severing ties with the religious authorities of the time. So this last point, I'm referencing the journals that Luther kept throughout his life. Contrary to popular belief, not all of his entries were scholarly, and it really helped his character to shine through for me when I did read these in a previous class. He wrote about day-to-day inconveniences and his suffering due to his constipation, and people are believed that he ultimately died from this. As we know, Luther was quite dramatic and descriptive. If you have not read his journals, I highly recommend. They're pretty interesting and funny. Let's jump into his early years and experiences. So Martin Luther was born on November 10th, 1483 in Germany to his father, Hans Luther. His family was relatively poor and they moved around a lot in order to try to make some more money. And Luther's father was actually employed as a miner. Due to their poor lifestyle, Hans, Luther's father, really desired for his son to be a successful lawyer to ensure that Luther was able to provide for himself the way that his father wished he was able to provide for him when he was young. Obviously, most parents would agree that they want their child to do better for themselves than they were able to do for them. And this was kind of the same thing. On his way to become a lawyer, Luther's father and family made sure that he got a really great education. He began school at a Latin school in Mansfeld in 1488, and he was later sent to Magdeburg to attend a boarding school that was operated by the Brethren of the Common Life, a monastic order who emphasized piety. So this was not, when Luther went into the monastery, that was not his first encounter with monks or with priesthood. So this was really interesting to learn about, since I did not previously know that he went to a school that was operated by monks. This is said to have a really tremendous impact on him. Obviously, he later becomes a monk. In 1501, he began attending university at the University of Erfurt. And at this time in history, this was the most distinguished university in Germany. So he was on his way to becoming a really great lawyer and a really highly educated individual in society. On his way home from university, he would travel by foot, as many people did, because there's no cars in that day. He was stuck in a thunderstorm where he clung to a tree for safety. While thinking he was going to die, Luther cried out to St. Anne, the mother of the Virgin Mary, and promised that if his life were spared, he would become a monk and devote his life to Christ instead of becoming a lawyer as his father wanted. So he did end up living, and so Luther followed through with his promise and became a monk. His father was extremely disappointed by this because he really wanted his son to be able to do really well for himself. And obviously this was not going to happen if Luther was going to become a monk. This event is really known as a life-changing moment for Luther, as obviously it's derailing his, future plans, or the plan that his father had for his life. I found this short 2-minute video that's just a little bit about Luther and his early life and, kind of throughout his life in a little snapshot. So we're going to watch this. So that's just a little snapshot about Luther in a really short and effective video. So moving on to Luther's philosophy. Luther combined his knowledge of theology with his philosophy, and this was not previously done before. So this was a time in history when there was a lot of corruption within the church and corruption within politics, and there were the wealthy families that were able to buy over religious authority to get them on their side when it came to voting and whatnot. So there was this separation of church and state that is still kind of seen today. We really don't want the church involved in politics and vice versa. His philosophy also was that religious authority resides in scripture alone, not scripture and church teaching. So Luther wanted to take as much power away from church officials as he could because, like I said, at this time, they were also involved in politics and other messy things that were not Christian per se. And Luther really did not agree with this. So he just wanted to make sure that church goers were able to just get what they needed with the scripture and leave all the rest of the stuff in the church. Church consists of the whole community of believers, not just clergy members. When previously, like I said, clergy members or church members were highly regarded individuals in society at this time. They often were wealthy. And so Luther just wanted to make it really prevalent and known that the church is the whole community, whether they're high in the social hierarchy or the lowest. Luther also believed that all church vocations were equally holy. He also stated that there were only 2 sacraments. In the church, obviously, we know that there are 7 sacraments, but Luther believed that baptism and the Eucharist were the most important. Luther also believed that salvation is achieved through faith alone, not actions. So as I was saying in the first point and second point, church officials obviously had a lot of money and they were able to do more for the community, but the money was dirty money. And, you know, these actions weren't always with the best of intentions or even Christian in intent. So Luther just wanted the less fortunate to know that salvation is achieved through faith alone and God knows your heart. Luther also believed that human reason is the biggest enemy of faith. A lot of people are still kind of on the fence about this due to his involvement in philosophy, which obviously includes reason and logic. But I think that Luther just believed that human reason, like we're prone to error, and that when we try to figure things out that aren't for us to know or to figure out, there is going to be a disconnect between us and God, because that will be kind of us doubting God in a way. Luther also believed that God is not distant and that you can communicate with him directly. He really wanted followers to know that you didn't have to be rich and you didn't have to be somebody important for God to listen to you, as was thought at the time. He wanted people to know that they could just communicate with God through prayer. And Luther was even said to believe that the less words you use in prayer, the better. Like just let your faith speak for itself, and God knows your heart, as I stated before. Luther also believed that the church was corrupt and needed reform. And we'll see why in this next slide. So, Luther's impact. The Reformation, obviously, after the posting of the 95 Theses, the church split into 2, and this could not be reconciled quietly as many church officials and politicians wanted it to be. It was just too obvious and it was out there for everybody to see, so there was no more hiding it at that point. There are also Protestants and Lutherans that still exist to this day, so that is the impact that Luther has had in the medieval world and the modern world. Luther also confronted corruption within the church through the 95 Theses and just through his words and the Reformation, which forced the church's hand to change its ways. So this is still impactful to this day because the church, the Lutheran church and the Protestant church, are still to this day founded on the principles that Luther proposed so long ago. Luther's philosophy combined theology and philosophy in a way that the world had never seen before. So this was super powerful. This opened many doors for people on both sides to come into contact and discuss ideas on both sides of the spectrum, philosophical and theological. And as I stated previously, the church and politics or philosophy did not intermix. You know, it's kind of like the whole, can science be something that is holy? You know, that whole Scientology debate that's going on. There just was not that intermixing previously, but this really opened doors for people on both sides to have constructive conversation with each other and discuss ideas that were theological or philosophical, or both theological and philosophical. So it really helped to make a gray area where it was only black and white previously. Many of Luther's teachings are still alive and well and discussed in philosophical and theological circles, and in courses such as this one, obviously political thought, in colleges and universities around the world. So Luther's had a really great impact, and his ideas are still being discussed. I believe that this is because of the power that Luther held in his time to be the first one to combine the theological and the philosophical. And I believe that this is why it will continue to be discussed, just that shock factor. Here are the works that I cited in this presentation and my paper. And thank you so much for listening to my presentation.